Okay, take three. So I made a video where I posted it, just the car idling without timing control, in the hopes of making in several other videos showing timing control and the benefits of it. And I'd like to say that it was a total success, but in my case it was not. I did buy the Sniper EFI CDI box distributor, Hyperspark distributor, and coil package from a vendor, one of the warehouses. Got a decent price on it for, which was just under 500 bucks still, or 440 or something, and they go for like 487 usually, or more if you buy them individually. Installed it per the instructions. Had some issues right away. I mean, I started up, the car fired right away. The hardware, or excuse me, the firmware was already updated. I just added the Hyperspark in addition, instead of running the Wizard initially. And when you do that, you have to know that it does not set the reference angle or the inductive delay correctly. You have to add those values in, so be aware of that. If you do it and run the Wizard, and if you don't have a tune already running in your car and you just start over, yeah, I presume it works. Actually, it does. I did it that way because when I fired it the first time, it would run, it would shut off, the tack would flicker, it would freak out, couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. Ended up, checking the forums, calling Holley, calling the vendor who sold me the fuel injection standalone. Chased issues for basically like 3 or 4 weeks. I'd make changes, pull the car out, start it up, and run in the driveway. It'd start freaking out, pull it back in the garage, done. Try to figure out what the issues were. Rewired everything back to the battery, didn't make a difference. Made a large diameter 2-gauge, or fairly large, ground cable from the battery up to the engine block, didn't make a difference. Moved every sensor wire, changed, and one of the first things was change plug wires that had Ultra 40s, and low impedance wires tend to create more RFI, even though they're supposed to be EMI suppression. Went to 800 ohms per inch, or foot, excuse me. Moroso Blue Max wire, no difference. Chased it for 5 weeks, and I had a decent tune in it. I had stolen the timing curve out of this, out of the TBI version 4 for the Terminator, which is a common thing guys were doing, using that curve because it was better than this, just the, when you put in 3 values and it makes a real simple curve with the Hyperspark. Tried it both ways, didn't make a difference, but that was my default, and I was going to improve that curve. Even though it was pretty slow for my engine, it was, it was a good start, better than what you could just put in by throwing in 3 values and letting the Sniper do it. Chased it for weeks, and then it got to, oh, you need to ground your hood, you need to ground your air cleaner, start applying tinfoil to different wires to shield them, and when you shield something, you have to ground it. So it means, if you're grounding multiple things related to that, like the hood and the air cleaner and X, Y, and Z, you have to ground those all to the same spot so you don't create ground loops. And ultimately, the car was completely unreliable. I only drove it like 2 blocks, it died. And what it turned out, it was getting radio frequency interference, and it was shutting the ECU off or making it restart constantly. So it went from never having RFI issues with the analog MSD 6AL box that's on it again. I reinstalled that. The wires aren't super clean right now, but the point being that I just was trying to get it to run for more than 5 minutes without shutting off or freaking out. It would idle up, and the timing would go whack and do all kinds of crazy stuff. I will say that when it ran, and I set the timing, and I did a bunch of things, and I was convinced I had fixed it. It ran out in the driveway for like 20 minutes, and timing control, the idle was smoother because the Sniper was controlling fuel and timing, obviously. It seemed like it was a good deal. It was kind of cool to see where your ignition timing is while you're going down the road on the handheld, those type of things, or at least in my driveway. But it was completely unreliable. As soon as I shut the hood or put the air cleaner on, or a combination of both, freak out. So that was acting like a shield, or a, probably the RFI is able to not be as concentrated, and then when you close it, it just focuses it right on the ECU. And I think bottom line is, I mean, yeah, there's guys running this, and there's, they get through their growing pains and make it work, and it's definitely probably a better way to go if you can make it work. But Holley produced this thing, and it's not properly shielded, and maybe if enough people see this, I'll get some comments to the contrary, and that's fine. But after talking to several electricians, and one of which who sells automotive electric components, and I have his system in this car that's worked pretty flawlessly for years, he was adamant about the fact that it was designed wrong, or just not properly shielded, and he was actually kind of pissed, and I won't even drop his name, it doesn't matter, but ultimately, I've even seen other vendors say this, that the system isn't properly shielded. When you have to go through and, of course, wire things correctly and get wires away from each other and having them not cross, that all makes sense. But when you have to start putting tinfoil to different wires and go through all this process because the ECU is so sensitive that it's freaking out from radio frequency interference, it seems like it's designed improperly to me, and I would stand behind that. But anyhow, I figured out what my deal was. Ultimately, I removed, like I said, I removed that distributor because it was male HEI terminals, so I had already done my plug wires, or new plug wires with male HEI terminals. So I ended up purchasing an aftermarket Summit Racing HEI terminal distributor cap, because the wires already loomed that way, and or terminated that way, and put it on thinking, there's no way I could still have RFI problems, and ultimately I started it up, it ran out in the driveway, did its normal thing, seemed fine. Obviously no timing control at that point, and this is the cap that I was using. Just it works with the stock style single point distributor, or an MSD distributor, or multiple Summit distributors. Although I will say that the cap does not have an indexing spot on it, so it doesn't stay completely fixed on the housing. So you could basically change your timing by moving your distributor cap, or create crossfiring and some other problems. But that aside, it still had issues. And my neighbor was telling me, when I was talking to him about this issue, he's like, well, it's like the last place you look, you'll figure it'll just click. And I started thinking about it, and what was the common denominator between the old ignition system that worked and the new ignition system that didn't, and even with the old one, what was the issue? And in terms of the problem, it was the male terminals. They apparently are not shielded. They stick outside the distributor cap. They're either higher up, they are higher up vertically, either closer to the ECU, or they're just not shielding themselves through the distributor cap. The female terminals on the old school single point style cap doesn't cause any problems, like none. I've driven the car a couple of times in the past couple of days. It runs really well. Obviously no timing control, which is a bummer, because the intent was to go to timing control to have someone dyno it and be able to perfect the timing curve, and be able to do that all on the laptop. Or, and I was starting to do that and trying to speed up the curve, and I never got it to run long enough. So, if you want to go for it, add timing control, just be prepared to troubleshoot and chase some gremlins. So there are guys out there that said, oh, I put it on, it works great, it's awesome. And, I think ultimately it would be a better system to have both. But you see the majority of guys, or at least a lot of the posts, because, it's like when you have a green car, you notice all the different green cars, same thing. I noticed all these posts where guys were having issues with the Hyperspark install or just timing control in general. It's a magnetic pickup distributor now, or it was. It's back to that, and those can, with a phasable rotor, can do timing control. But the magnetic pickup is a source of radio frequency interference, or EMI, and the Hall effect from this Hyperspark is not. And the same thing with the dual sync, but you still see guys having trouble because it's going back to the ECU, and the ECU is now more prone to picking up RFI apparently. And I think that still leads back to the fact that it's not the ECU is not properly shielded, or either they rushed it to market and didn't do their due diligence, and now it's they put out these parts and say, hey, all you have to do is just wire 5 wires and stick it on, timing control, and they make videos, and that's all well and good. And I think it ultimately is a better setup if you can make it work. But in my case, it made my car completely unreliable, like virtually worthless. I could have shielded all the plug wires. There are guys that have done that. I saw, looking at some shielding material. There was somebody who, wrapped, or not even wrapped, it was sleeve style material on your plug wires, and you have to run a ground to each plug wire and ground all your plug wires, and that fixed his issue. I don't know if it was a sniper. It just said he had EFI problems and this is what he used. And I was about ready to do that, and when it came to putting tinfoil on all these things and grounding my air cleaner all in the hood, and just throwing darts in the dark basically at the problem, I went back to what worked. How much benefit there is in terms of horsepower or something like that, I don't know really. I'm sure there could be potentially with dyno tuning, but I'd rather have something that was dependable and works. So the female terminals on a single point cap are what helps me. I don't know if the elevation of the throttle body, in other words, the carb spacer's pretty big. It's like a 1 3/4 4-hole tapered spacer meant for a carburetor, and something I had already. And the Sniper likes to whistle with an open plenum manifold. So I've been running that, and it seems to work pretty well. And so maybe that distance, which if you changed it, it would pick up problems. But I'm back to where I started, and 5 weeks later, and it still cost me probably $150 worth of messing around, buying a new battery, buying cable, buying wires, terminals, doing all this stuff. And the wiring is definitely not where I want it right now, because I've just moved everything in hopes of trying to figure out what the solutions were. So I benefited some, and I'll fix those things, and the engine's got to come back out, unfortunately, anyway. So I plan on cleaning up the firewall, but now I have new holes in the firewall and all this other stuff for mounting coils and messing around with it. But ultimately, of course, it's your choice, just like anything, you're on your own. I mean, Holley will help you some, but it's kind of, you can find it in the data log that you have an RFI issue, and that's pretty, I guess, one of the telltale signs is your throttle position sensor, the low voltage sensors, and the rate of change, if that changes, or if it resets, or you show negative values. That's a good indication of RFI. I haven't run a data log to check, but I didn't have it prior, so I'm hoping that's still the case, but it's not resetting or having any issues. So I'm just going to run it like this. It runs really hard. Hopefully the fuel curve, I can get that tuned out. I'm doing some other things with that, and maybe I'll go after a dyno tuner later. I don't know. But, if you decide to go timing control, well, more power to you. Good luck. I know there's guys that are running it, and I'll probably if I get any comments, it'll be to the contrary. What you didn't do this or you didn't do that, and maybe so. But I did a lot of things to try to get it to work, and it doesn't seem like a complete system that an ignition system to work with that specific EFI built for it should have problems right from the get-go. It seems like if you have your wires not crossing and it's wired appropriately, the control unit itself, the CDI, and all those things, that it shouldn't need to be, 30 hours or 40, 50 hours of troubleshooting to get it to run correctly. So each card's different, hoods reflect, different amount of RFI. I don't know. But if it was me, or it is me, and I'm not going to run it for a while, if ever again. So good luck.